Thank you for joining me for the 3-Minute Reel. My name is Binta Wadrago Notaris, and I'll be your host for today. For this special edition of the 3-Minute Reel, I will be speaking to a collective of women change makers in their own communities. We've gotten personal with women change makers, professionals, teachers, mothers, who are juggling through their everyday life and are setting the tone, really, for the future. We hope you enjoy.
My name is Tina Bianchia, and who am I? So I am a Ugandan citizen, a naturalized American. I spent a long time, moved to the US for university, spent a number of years in the US working, and then a couple of years ago, moved to Kenya to work for USAID, which stands for the US Agency for International Development. Primarily a focus on getting a sense of, is what we're doing responding to needs of the populations that we serve, and is it working?
I am from Massachusetts originally. I moved to California when I was in high school, and then I stayed there through college, which is where we met. Following graduating from San Diego, I got an internship in Washington, D.C. So I eventually got a job at a consulting company in the area. So while I was still working there, I went to grad school to get my master's in public policy. While I was finishing up grad school, I got a new job at my current company where I've been for almost 10 years, focused on kind of regulatory and compliance work.
First, I studied biology for 2 years here at the University of Ouagadougou without success. Then I decided to launch myself in studying English. And I earned a BA in English. I got hired here at ISO as teaching assistant. Then afterwards, I decided to take online classes to be a certified ESOL teacher. So currently, I teach ESOL for elementary school and upper school as well.
I grew up in Southern California, and I was in a Waldorf school from kindergarten through 8th grade. At the same time, even though I had this really kind of holistic approach to studying, very self-motivated, there weren't any grades in the school, I also was studying classical dance. I was always kind of between this very sort of like rigorous approach and a very alternative kind of holistic perspective. When I graduated from college, I spent a year in Burkina Faso with a Fulbright grant. Well, I ended up training with a cohort of young dancers who ended up becoming very accomplished professional dancers. Now I'm doing a PhD in anthropology, and I'm trying to develop a project with artists in Burkina Faso, particularly women artists who are seeking to develop sustainable careers in contemporary dance in West Africa.
What's my favorite thing about being a woman? I think one of my favorite things is probably the ability to engage and just communicate with other women. I think women in a lot of spaces, in a lot of countries that I've either worked or lived in, are allowed access to spaces that men aren't. And a lot of times women are not in public spaces in a lot of the countries that I work in. And so being able, again, to just kind of push for these different activities or interventions to make sure that we are accessing women, to make sure that we're creating safe spaces for them, and to make sure that we're asking them their opinion as well.
The delight I've come to take in spaces that women develop amongst themselves. Taking enjoyment in being in communion, being in your body, dressing up, like enjoying the world.
So I think one of the biggest barriers, I think that you're kind of expected to behave a certain way. You're expected to just, be kind of like light and like, oh yeah, I got that, or yeah, it's no problem, when maybe you really like need some guidance, you need some help, kind of have to downplay really like how smart you are, especially when you're just starting out. It can be really hard because you're trying to figure out who you are. It's hard at that time, but then the more you get into your career and the more that you can kind of figure out what matters to you, kind of what your values are, you kind of navigate toward finding those things, and then it makes being a woman in the workplace or even on a daily basis out in the world, it makes it a little bit easier once you know who you are and what you're looking for and kind of like what you won't put up with. Another big thing for me is finding another woman who even was like 5-7 years older than me to just be like, okay, this is what you need to be doing. That also
A role model of some sort.
Exactly.
One barrier is for a very long time, and I think for me it was being a young Black woman in my field. So all of those kind of intersecting. I was overlooked a lot. I look younger than I am. I come from a completely different part of the world from a lot of the people who I was working with. I used to work on a project based in Nigeria. So I was traveling a lot to Nigeria. And so going to Nigeria and staying in a hotel, as everyone does, who's coming from my company.
Right.
And I remember at a certain point in time, stopping, like no longer going to the restaurant to eat, because every single time I went, people assumed I was a sex worker, because there was no other reason why a young woman would be sitting by herself at a bar, having an alcoholic beverage and a meal in this super fancy hotel, right? But so it's those things where it's like I feel like I have to shout my expertise way before I even enter the room for people to know, like, I'm here because I deserve to be here, and because I know what I'm speaking about, and because I've worked hard for it. But also because of the work that I do, and this coming back to just being a woman in this field, monitoring and evaluation sometimes ends up being filled with a lot of statisticians and economists who historically have been primarily male, right? If I am in a space with mostly men, it's how do I engage in these conversations where people are saying some pretty messed up things about just either women in the country, or the way in which they walk is very, very different from the way in which I walk, right? I have to build a relationship with these people because these are who my coworkers are, versus I have to call them out. And how do I call them out without being completely cut out and pushed up?
So I didn't have a specific answer to this, but I immediately thought my mother, and then I thought, kind of like all my sisters, like I don't have any biological sisters, but all the ones that have turned out to be sisters for me, just those conversations that have been wildly inspiring, their sort of willingness to be wildly inspired and wildly creative, and also just ridiculously hardworking.
The women who inspire me, definitely just the women that I work with. It's really nice to just be surrounded by women who know who they are and they're strong, and they encourage that out of everyone around them. No matter what age you are in the workplace, it can be hard to kind of speak up and voice your opinion and disagree. So just working with women who kind of say, like, I know that you're gonna like say whatever about this thing that I'm putting out there, but that doesn't matter to me because I know that other people need to hear it.
I think it's a massive impact. So there's this author who kind of always talks about how we need to view ourselves as ancestors, right? Because we are ancestors to someone down the line. And the ways in which we choose to kind of walk through the world and navigate the world will create a story that is told to someone years later. And so I think for me, that's one of the things. It's like, I have to want to know what my anchor is, what my value system is, and I have to walk through the world proudly and with my head high, because there's people watching me, and especially there's young girls watching me that I don't even know are watching me. This company I used to work with, I was only there for a year, and I decided to leave because the company culture just wasn't a good fit. And when I was leaving, one of the things that was interesting was a lot of the young women came up to me, and I was very surprised because some of them I'd never had a conversation with them, but a lot of them just came up to me and they were just like, the way in which you walk, you're very sure of yourself. You have a confidence that is really nice to see. And it was a shock to me. I was just doing my work, right? I was just doing my work, I was doing my thing. But I think a long time ago, I decided that I'm not going to make myself small for anyone, because I think making yourself small, it just gives someone else permission to make themselves small as well.
Yeah, I study language, and specifically I study discourse, our individual actions, conversations, behaviors, and mindsets. It's not just that they have an impact on society, but they make and they remake society on a daily basis. There's a way that little elements of entrenched ideas are strung together in everyday speech that are part of what perpetuates structural violence and inequity. Because our words aren't just what they mean literally, but they make impacts in the world.
I think that one thing to keep in mind, and because I have a tendency to think like really broadly, and sometimes those big changes come through like really small actions, and sometimes it may not always seem like, oh, it doesn't matter if I do this because what impact like will that really have? But I think that when you're a woman, not only in the workplace, but just in society, there have been a lot of changes for women and we've come a long way.
Absolutely.
But I think that women, still need to keep up with supporting each other and going for what they really want to go for. Like, don't minimize yourself, because then that can just have, if that's what people see, then that's just going to be what they assume it is. You want to make sure that you're being supportive and, just making sure that, you're not kind of downplaying or minimizing yourself, even at that small scale, because I think it can kind of bleed out.
Domino effect, yeah.
Even if that's not the intention.
I think it's very important. What does this look like to me to kind of hold other women up? I think it's supporting each other, amplifying each other, however it is that we can. I think that's incredibly important. Helping each other network. I think for a long time, it took me probably longer than it should have to kind of come to a place where I understand why it's important to help us ourselves network, right? People do it all the time. People who come from legacies do it all the time. So I think that's incredibly important. And it's also celebrating each other. You speak to the accomplishments that your female friends have done. You shout them out, especially if they're not able to shout them out, you can shout them out, right? You shout them out to the rest of the world, but also you just remind them of just how incredible they are.
We always encounter barriers, either in our workplace with males and also in our culture with the males in our culture, in our society. Yes, we do encounter these kind of barriers and then thinking, because as we grow, we represent a kind of competitors with the male gender. But as I think, as an educator, we can think beyond, and then we know how to tackle these kind of difficult situations, and we always know how to analyze them, because what is important for us, it is the ending. Mm-hmm. That the end is most important than all these clashes. So we know which kind of tools we can use in order to erase and go beyond.
So I think the biggest challenge will be just kind of continuing the momentum that we've seen the past year, maybe a little more. I definitely took for granted the fact that I went to college, majored in whatever I wanted, applied for an internship across the country, got it, and just moved, and then just started working. Mm-hmm. And had, definitely some challenges, but also opportunities and a way out when I realized something wasn't working for me. And then, while I'm working, I also went to grad school because I felt like it. And it was something I could afford to do. And I can say that I definitely didn't really think when all of that was happening, I wasn't thinking like, oh, this wasn't an option for like my mom. And I feel like it's definitely either something I'm paying more attention to, or there's just a lot more talk about it. For my coworkers who are in their late 20s, early 30s, I think they recognize it a little bit more. And I would hope that that continues, because things aren't equal. Mm-hmm. And we've especially seen that during the pandemic. What was it, the month of December? Like, it was mostly women who dropped out of the workforce. So it's definitely something that is very prevalent, and continuing that momentum and saying like, yes, we've accomplished a lot, but we have a lot more to do is just going to be a challenge, because it's really easy to get complacent.
I think in Uganda, I think one of the challenges that's coming up is just, I think a lot of young women, it's impressive to see how they're taking up space and just how they're so sure of who they are. But the system hasn't changed that much. So I think that they're going to hit it, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to hit it. But there's going to be more of them hitting it. So what I'm hoping is that if there's more of them hitting it, they can maybe crack it open. But also culture is strong, right? And people do a very good job of keeping culture. You can do all of the work on self, mm-hmm. but to come up against a system that is just bent on reminding you of what your place is, right, is infuriating and just saddening at mm-hmm. so many levels. In the US, there's just a lot more more access to opportunities. I think what I do hope is that the young generation of women take these opportunities. What I also do hope is that you just see more diversity. In the US, we run the risk of everyone just kind of, again, siloing themselves in their various racial groups or various economic groups because of just this backlash to what's happening. And what I hope is that, because what I don't want to happen is to then kind of end up with these very, like, women are kind of trying to push, but like white women have no idea what Black women are dealing with, right? No idea what Latinx women are dealing with. Because I think women in the past tried so hard to kind of push, and even right now, to kind of push the importance of intersectionality, that if we shift away from it, that it's just not a good move.
For now, I have just one thing in my mind. I think what would be their issue, it is being accepted as 100% professional. They are going to be well informed about their rights. All these tools that they would gather are going to be a kind of threat for the society and for the male gender. So I think it will be very difficult for the society to accept this.
What does it mean to me? I think it means it's a reminder that women experience systems very differently, and we need to remember that. But it's also a reminder sometimes for how far we've come, and sometimes it's a reminder for how far we have not come, right?
Women's Month is important. I think growing up, I didn't really take it as seriously as I've gotten older, because it was just another kind of day to, oh, yay, woman, I'm a lady, I'm a woman, yay, you know, and kind of advocating for myself without really understanding what that really means, you know, for the rest of us.
And I think that sometimes you don't necessarily see it until you're kind of in it. Like there were a lot of things I didn't think about until I was in the workforce, especially like a corporate environment where you're encouraged to be a free thinker, but like within parameters, you know, it takes time to kind of see it, but
we got to continue to kick butt.
Yeah.
When it first hit, I guess I was not seeing it coming. I was the co-president at that time of the Graduate Student Union here at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. You know, we were dealing with a lot of really intense stuff, but when the pandemic hit, it really just flipped something for me. And I was like, we need to kick into gear. Like, we need to make sure that our members, like the grad student workers, you know, we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can so that people are okay and that all workers on campus are okay. You know, I saw economic crisis coming, it just all kind of like my perspective on things kind of started to flip, and I just went into high gear, just trying to organize and make sure that grad workers had healthcare over the summer, for instance, things like this, to try to make sure the basics were covered. And I was really angry a lot of the time. And I think that like anger and just like utter distaste at what was going on fueled a lot of activity. So I also definitely got pretty burnt out. But there's this whole other aspect that has been about being able to be at home and not having to rush to go to the next thing, that I've also really started to practice rest and having a sense of spaciousness in myself to like listen a little bit better. I think in Burkina Faso, people say, you know, like your health is like the most important of all things, is that you have your health. And I never got that. I literally never got that until this year.
Because it was so weird how everything just stopped. You're just like in a routine. You get up, maybe you work out, you take your kids to school, you go to work, you like do the things on your to-do list, and then you have things to do after work, and everyone's just like really busy. And then all that just kind of stopped. I think I just realized like I didn't need to be doing a lot of those things. I put a lot of emphasis on getting certain things done or making sure I was involved in XYZ. And at the end of the day, not that like nothing mattered, but not all of those things were such a big deal. You know, I've been on this road trying to work with my career and school since I was 22, and I have a lot of career left. And like, what do I really want to be doing? You know, what can I do that has more value and more of an impact?
So I've had to make choices, but I think the reason I paused was because I 100% think it would be viewed as sacrifice by other people. I do think so. So I think for me, I am a very driven person. I'm also a person who's just always been just kind of very indifferent about whether or not I want to have children. And so, but in a lot of the cultures that we come from, this is not something that we talk about. And so I think the choices that I've made have been to just kind of really focus on my career, also because I have a career that I really love. Like I've had people tell me, well, you're doing well now, so now you can have kids. And I was like, but you're not asking me the basic question, like, do you want to have kids? And so sometimes I feel as though people outside look at my life and assume I've made sacrifices, but which I haven't. I've just made choices to center self, right? And to center self in terms of what it is that I want to do. I think earlier in my life, yes, I did. Now I'm thinking I did make sacrifices. Again, around another, my ex-husband, a male partner, where I made sacrifices around, I didn't realize what I was doing at that point in time, but just around how I was pushing myself. I think I was still very ambitious, but in terms of how ambitious I was being, how front and center I was putting myself, and how much I was like boasting about myself, right? Because he was in a tough place professionally, and how I had learned to navigate life till then was that as a woman, I can't be seen as supporting him. Now I have a fantastic partner who I don't even have to think about that. But at that point in time, it was something that was going on in my mind without me even realizing what was happening.
My life has been very challenging, but nurturing and very enriching. It has been and continues to be, because I have learned to accommodate and adjust my responsibilities as a woman, as a mother, and as a wife. I have learned to put all these responsibilities together and make it happen, and have a successful life as a mother, as a professional, and as a housewife. Have I sacrificed something? The thing that I have sacrificed most is my time, my personal time. Yeah, because I spend less time to take care of myself. But I have not sacrificed the time that I give to my kids and the time I spend for my profession. I take all the time that I need for my profession in order to be successful as a teacher. So I think the thing that I sacrificed most is the time for myself. That's what I think.
Education is so important, and I hope we can not just think about, but really work on setting some foundations for learning for the future that are not even just about the educational system, but to try to focus on what is it that is important to teach.
I believe so much in education, and I thank you for giving me that opportunity to voice in this direction. And I hope we could have, our channel can have a broader impact on kids and on kids and on educators, so the society can understand the power of education and also work in that direction. Education, but the right education, the right one.
Yes, actually, one thing, and this came up when I think you asked this question about like, how do we kind of hold each other up as women? So it reminded me of this fantastic book that I read a few months ago. It's called First Woman. It's by this Ugandan British author called Jennifer Makumbi. And in it, so the protagonist is this young girl who is having a conversation with her grandmother. And her grandmother tells her a story where she says, you know, what tends to happen to women, especially in patriarchal societies, is, so she compares it to like chicken in like a hen coop, right? And so like you have a lot of chickens, and maybe you have more chickens than should be in this coop. And so what tends to happen is the chickens start to bite each other because they're feeling like, you know, they're feeling constrained, there's not enough space. And so they start to take it out on the other chickens, as opposed to realizing that there's a larger system, right? There's this chicken coop that's forcing us. And if we could somehow find a way out of this chicken coop, we wouldn't have to fight each other. And the grandmother makes this comparison to women in patriarchal societies. And so what she's telling her granddaughter, she's like, you know, just like promise me if you ever find yourself in a situation where for whatever reason you feel like sudden anger or hatred or whatever it is towards a woman and you don't really know her, ask yourself why, right? There's enough space for both of us to win.
It's easier to just tell someone, hey, you modify your behavior than us actually doing anything about that, because that's going to be hard work. It is going to be more people involved. We're going to have to do like paperwork or stuff like that. There's just like always something else that needs to be done. And it's almost just easier to tell someone like, why don't you just like calm down? But then like the more I moved along in my career, I think that maturity, just more like self-awareness and confidence to know that like, if that happens again, because I've been in the situation where I just said, okay, and backed off, I'm not going to do that again. And I've definitely had it happen where I've had to, raise those concerns or voice an opinion that was not popular. But in my mind, and I stuck with it because in my mind, I'm not going to sacrifice, those values that I hold to have people, be held accountable and take responsibility. Because I'm like, if I'm, going to behave a certain way, I would expect others to.
What being a woman means to me is being able to be powerful and assertive, yet also delicate and vulnerable. Being able to open your heart to those around you, but also be able to carry the past generations and the future generations.
What being a woman means to me is showing up every day and being present no matter how you feel and putting your best foot forward.
To me, being a woman means being powerful and striving for whatever you want and whatever you can do in life.
I would say when I look at my mother and my grandmother, I see them as being women of wisdom and women that raise families and raise generations. So I would say being a woman, what that means to me is taking on that role of leadership. And in the Bible it says, the elders teach the younger. So I would say that would be my role, is to all the things that I've learned in my life, to be able to pass those on to the younger generations and share with them. Also upholding legacy as well, and helping to nurture and foster community. And that's what being a woman means to me.
It was a great opportunity to speak with all the amazing women for this e-forum. Each one of us walks a different path, with a reminder that in order for this path to be smooth, we must do it together. Let us look beyond that coop that surrounds us and make the groundbreaking changes to be respected for who we really are as women. It's also important to note that although we do have a set date to celebrate the achievements and accomplishments of women, Women's Month or women should be celebrated every day of the year.